Hi everyone, I'm Les.
And I'm Ashley.
And you're listening to Anthropotamus, where we explore some of your favorite anthropology topics.
Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Anthropotamus. We are here today with Dr. Matthew Bennett from Bournemouth University. Well, I'm sure many of you have seen the article out. So usually, we have these researchers coming out with these great topics, but we don't really see them very often in mainstream media. But I'm sure many of you have seen this article on footprints in North America. I know the first time I saw this article, it was actually floating around on a bioarchaeology group on Facebook. So we are here today to discuss evidence of humans in North America during the last glacier maximum. Dr. Bennett, thank you so much for coming with us today. Can you tell us, before we get started to the article, your background is in geology and geography, but a lot of your research has to do with footprints and foot morphology. Can you tell us how exactly did you get in such a specific research field?
As you say, I'm a geologist, sedimentologist, and I've worked in a variety of areas over extended period of time. First in the high Arctic and then in Central America and Africa. And it was really work that I began to do looking at footprints and looking at technology to capture those footprints in 3D that led me to get involved with the succession of footprint finds in Africa. And over time, wrote a textbook, plenty of papers, and became something of an expert, or perceived as an expert in the field. So it just happened, really. It's not by design. I did try and move away from footprints for a while, but it hasn't really succeeded.
Since you bring that up, before we get into the article, since you say that, I'm curious, what other topics have you tried focusing on besides footprints?
So these days I work in a range of archaeological and geoarchaeological problems, human evolution really. But historically I'm a glacial geologist, and I spent my time in the high Arctic on various quaternary ice age problems and glacial mechanical problems. And that's where the first decade of my career was spent before I started to get involved with warmer places.
So we have this article that came out. It's all over the internet right now. I have to know, how did you guys... So the footprints were found in White Sands National Park, for those who haven't read the article. How did you find these footprints?
So White Sands National Park is an amazing place. It's really two parts. There's a huge gypsum dune field, these white majestic dunes, and there's also a playa, a former lake bed, that is eroding, deflating to create the sand for the dunes. And my good friend David Bustos, who's the resources manager at White Sands, had long believed that there were human tracks at White Sands. We'd known for a while that there were mammoth tracks and giant ground sloth tracks, but he thought there were human tracks. So in 2016 he reached out to me as a footprint expert to really look at them, and I went there for the first time in January 2017, and we started to work together on the footprints there, and built up various stories and snapshots into past life on the playa. But we weren't able really to date the footprints other than by their association with extinct animals like mammoth and ground sloth. And it wasn't until September 2019 that we found a locality where we could see a clear line of footprints going on into the distance under a pile of sediment, a bluff that was in situ sediment, hadn't been disturbed. And at that point we realized we stood a chance at dating them. And that led to a major excavation in January 2020, when a bunch of folks came out to excavate and to date the tracks. COVID happened, which slowed us down, but finally the work was published in September of this year.
I mean, how excited were you guys when you found that? I know I would probably scream if I found footprints.
Well, we knew that there were footprints there for a long time. It was just that the dating context didn't really exist. We weren't getting them in a position where we could be clear that the overlying sediments were in situ. So I wasn't actually that excited, to be honest, because the site's real potential is in the interaction of humans with megafauna. You can actually paleo-track the megafauna and the human and their interactions. And I think that sort of behavioral ecology is far more interesting than their absolute date. And there's so much controversy associated with the peopling of the Americas that I wasn't that pleased that we were going to enter that debate, really. But you know, you find what you find, and we enter that debate.
So since you bring up the debate, since this article's come out, what kind of pushback have you guys gotten?
It's been fairly well received. It's still very early days. It's only been out 6 weeks or so, slightly less than that. So, you know, we're getting positive comments. There's some concern about the dating, some aspects. You know, people want clarification about methods and the ways in which we don't think certain things are problems. But you know, it's all generally very positive. But with all of these things, it's time that's the important thing. You know, you can't judge a site or a paper until 4 or 5 years down the line, when you know the dust has settled, people have had a chance to reflect and critique your work, but also we've had a chance to bring forward much more of the detail. As I say to people, all we've written is the headline, and we now need to write the article. So the science paper is the headline. Now we need to bring forward all the detailed work that forms the body of the story in due course, and that has been delayed by COVID, but we hope to be back in the field in January and continue to work at the site and collect more of the detail.
So, since you mentioned that there's concern about the dating methods and clarification on that, I was reading the article and it said that the real tipping point was a plant that you guys found in one of the footprints that you were able to carbon date. If that's correct, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So the footprints are interleaved, if you like, with layers of seeds that are common ditch grass. And the seeds are very prominent, very beautiful little things. And it's the dating of the seeds that allows us to do that. Now, depending on what you know about radiocarbon, the concern that people do have is that aquatic plants can have a hard water effect, and that's just that they are, putting it crudely, drinking water that's already got a little bit of an age, and this can make the dates a bit older than they should be. But we rebut that quite well in the paper, even though I say so myself, by comparing it with other terrestrial dates and really dealing with that detail. And that will always be, anybody who wants to rubbish the dates will say, oh, there's a hard water date, they're older than they should be. And we would argue, and as we have done in the paper, that the dates are sound. But there's more work to do. There's always more work to do, and it's only as we do that work that the community as a whole will gain confidence in the dates and the evidence that we put forward.
So in the article, you mentioned that a lot of the footprints were from children and teenagers, and the first thing I think is well, like my mother-in-law, she's a very teeny person who has feet like a 10-year-old. So, how exactly is it that you can tell between, let's say, a teenager and an adult foot?
You can't really. So that's the truth. So all we're doing is we're using size of the footprints, and we're using modern growth curves, the sort of thing that you monitor child's development with. You know, their feet get bigger as you get older, and we're using those modern curves to make inferences about the potential ages, and those ages come with error margins and lots of caveats. So you're exactly right. Some of these teenage tracks could well be just small adults. It's a balance of probability that we use, and only when we excavate more of these surfaces will we build up greater confidence in the assertions that we will make about the group composition.
Les, do you have any other questions?
I am, a little bit more interested in like you said, the megafauna that were at the site as well. You mentioned that you can track the interactions between. Was there anything that stood out as far as the interactions go? I know it's not exactly easy to tell, but what could you tell from the tracks about the interactions?
So at the site at which the dating is based, which is this locality 2, there isn't much that we can say at the moment other than there are various dog-like prints stepping over and into the human tracks, so that there's a lot of canids there of one form or another, which is what you would expect. Not necessarily saying that the dogs were in any way domesticated. We just naturally, wild dogs tend to associate with humans scavenging. But if you go back and look at our earlier work, so back in 2018, we looked at another site on the playa that we were able to reconstruct how the humans were hunting a giant ground sloth. And, laid out in the footfall of the humans and the sloth was a story about how they were interacting. We've got other examples of how the humans were interacting, or the animals were wary of the humans' trails and trackways, and so there are a lot of behavioral, ecological aspects to this that could be reconstructed.
I really look forward to seeing what else you guys collect from this site, especially as far as the interactions go.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and we'll be working at the site for a few years to come. And as I say, all we've done so far is we've written a headline, and now we need to bring forward the detail for the full story, and we'll do that in the coming years.
So besides this particular work, what other research are you interested into getting into in the near future?
So I work on footprint sites in a whole variety of places. So just before this paper came out, we had a paper on a series of hand and foot impressions in Tibet that were produced as art, or we believe they were produced as art, as young kids were playing in a hot spring, in limestone, a hot spring. So I'm working in Tibet at the moment, but I also work in forensic practice. So a lot of the footprint methods and algorithms and analytical procedures we develop for fossil footprints, we translate into forensic practice. So we do quite a lot of work translating this work into helping forensic officers at crime scenes, developing tools for them. So we're active in that field. So it's not just pure archaeology, anthropology. We also translate that into, as my mother would say, into something useful.
That's amazing.
Hey everyone, Anthropotamus is going on break for the month of December. Thanks for listening to this episode, and stay tuned for more.
Thank you all for listening. Distribution of Anthropotamus is in collaboration with the American Anthropological Association. Please continue to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Anthropotamus for our latest episodes, show notes, and book discussion schedule.